Good evening and welcome to the January 31st meeting of the Falmouth Conservation Commission. This meeting is being held virtually via Zoom video conference and is also being broadcast by FCTV on cable channel 9. As this meeting is being recorded by Zoom and broadcast by FCTV, please be cognizant of what you say, how you say it, and what can be seen and heard in your background. We're missing one commissioner tonight. However, we have a quorum. We're moving forward. I'd like to remind you guys that for commenting, I'll call on each of you in turn. So let's not speak over each other, and that all votes have to be done by roll call. So when I call your name, please state your name and your vote for the record, even if you've made the motion or the second. To our public participants, at any time during this meeting, you may enter any comments or questions via the chat function. At the appropriate time, they will be read into the record. If you'd like to be heard on a specific hearing, let us know via the chat function. Then at the appropriate time, I will call for public comment. When you are selected, you will be moved into the hearing as a participant. As such, you must have your video enabled. Be succinct and respectful of others. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes each. Regarding RDAs, under a request for determination of applicability, the applicant is asking the commission to determine if the provisions of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and/or the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw apply to their proposed project. A negative determination is that the provisions of the act and/or the bylaw do not apply, so the project may proceed as proposed. However, a positive determination means that the provisions of the act and/or the bylaw do in fact apply and/or may require some conditions. Therefore, the project would require a notice of intent application. So as an applicant, you really want to hear a negative determination. And for the benefit of anyone waiting for a particular hearing tonight, and so that you're not waiting unnecessarily, the following hearing is expected to be continued. 24 Willis Lane. All right, first up is, I think, a typo. Vote minutes, January 31, 2024.
Chairman, I review the minutes and move approval as written. Patton.
We haven't had,
No,
we haven't had that meeting.
This is tonight, that's January 31st. I apologize.
Let's be proactive here. All right, so I don't think we can
It was a short meeting.
postpone this, correct, Alyssa?
Yes, we'll put it on to the February 14th hearing if that works for everybody.
It's supposed to be the 24th.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. So brings us to the real first thing up. Request for a continuance for determination of applicability. Joseph Zampatella, Zampatella, 87 Nauset Ave East, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to replace existing timber ties and vista prune according to FWR 10.1810B. Ms. Bergeron.
The applicant has requested a continuance until February 14th.
So moved, Harlow Hawks.
Gladfilter second.
All right, Alyssa, if you don't mind, I'm just going to remind you that I know this is an RDA, so it's not applicable, but we don't want to continue anything else to the 14th.
Correct. There will be
Okay.
a request for a notice. I would recommend not the 14th, but the 2 RDAs getting continued that want to request the 14th, I think will take 2 minutes of your time that night.
Okay.
So they should be quick.
Thank you. We should have said that before we even started, but what can I tell you? All right, we have a motion and a second to continue this RDA request to 2/14. Betsy.
Gladfilter aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin.
O'Brien, aye.
Maury.
Harlow Hawks eye.
Steve.
Patton, aye.
With the existing quorum, this is we've accepted. We've continued this to 2/14. Sorry, lost my place here. All right, Eileen, next request for continuance, Eileen Meany, 30 Marshview Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to repair the existing deck, platform and railings and to reconstruct the stairs in accordance with the state building code. Ms. Bergeron.
Yes, the applicant has requested a continuance until March 20th.
So moved, Harlow Hawks.
Gladfelter, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to continue this request until March 20th. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, I.
Maury,
Harlow Hawks Eye.
Steve.
And I.
It was unanimous with this quorum. We have continued this to 3/20. Next up is a request for a continuance under a notice of intent. Sarah Tirano Flores, Nutter McLennan and Fish, LLP, 24 Willis Lane, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to reconstruct an existing licensed dock and to remove a timber wave break. Ms. Bergeron.
The applicant has requested a continuance until February 14th. The 21st could be your next available date.
Are they going to be ready? This has
I
been
don't know.
continued like multiple times.
I know, I don't know. Could
All right,
always
well,
continue to another date if the board so chose.
we'll offer them the 21st. We're not doing it the 14th.
Okay, so moved.
Harlow Hawks second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to continue this till February 21st. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, I.
Maury,
Harlow Hawks Eye.
Steve.
And I.
It is unanimous with this quorum. We have continued this hearing until February 21st. All right, brings us to requests for determination of applicability. First up, Town of Falmouth, Minot Beach West, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to move existing boulders on the town-owned Minot Beach and a line just below the western Minot Beach parking area for temporary storm protection. Ms. Bergeron.
Staff recommends a -2 under the state and bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Harlow Hawks so moved.
O'Brien,
Enthusiastic second.
Ooh. All right, we have a motion and competition on the seconds. Any questions or comments? All right, the motion and the second is to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, I.
Maury,
Harlow Hawks Eye.
Steve.
And I.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, Mark O'Sullivan, 18 Edgewater Drive East, East Falmouth, Mass, for permission to replace 2 retaining walls, remove a set of stairs, and install mitigation and restoration plantings. Ms. Bergeron.
The applicant's representative has requested a continuance until February 14th.
So moved.
So
Harlow
moved.
Harlow Hawks second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to continue this until February 14th. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, I.
Maury,
Harlow Hawks Eye.
Steve.
And I.
It is unanimous. We have continued this until 2/14. Next up, actually, this one's already been continued. So the real next up, Joshua and Behair Cohen, 48 Sweet Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to replace the board, steps, and railings on an existing deck and to repair framing if needed. Ms. Bergeron.
Staff recommends a -3 under the state and a -2 under the bylaw. Resource area boundaries are not confirmed.
Harlow Hawks so moved.
Gladfelter, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, I.
Maury,
Harlow Hawks Eye.
Steve?
And I.
It is unanimous. We have accepted staff's recommendation. Next up, excuse me, Scott and Colleen Filozzi, 188 Minot Road, Falmouth, Mass, for permission to construct 2 additions and a shed, expand an existing patio, reconstruct a porch, install drainage trenches, and repair a failed Title V sewage disposal system. Ms. Bergeron.
The applicant's representative has requested a continuance until February 21st.
So moved. Gladfelter.
Carla Hawk, second.
All right, questions or comments? All right, we're voting to accept staff's recommendation. Betsy?
Aren't we continuing it? We're voting to continue it.
I'm sorry. Yes, continue until February 21st.
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin?
O'Brien, aye.
Maury?
Carla Hawk's eye.
Steve?
And I.
It is unanimous. We have continued this till February 21st. All right, next up, request for a continuance
Excuse me.
for determination of applicability. What? Okay. Wouldn't this be with the others?
We already approved.
Yeah, I'm
No,
sorry,
wait.
the verbiage is kind of screwy.
Yeah, I think just the wrong thing got copied and pasted.
Yeah,
For
okay.
the,
You got me. All right. Next up, our continued request for hearing under a notice of intent. All hearings of the Falmouth Conservation Commission are held simultaneously under the authorities of the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw. Although a single decision of the commission is issued, it represents a separate decision under each authority. As a reminder, public commenting is limited to 3 minutes. So I encourage you to stay within the purview of this board, which are the rules and regulations of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Falmouth Wetlands Bylaw, and how they pertain to a particular application. The chair reserves the right to stop any commenting that is disparaging or inconsequential to the hearing. Also, please know that all correspondence received by the Conservation Department is forwarded to all commissioners and becomes part of the record. We will not be reading each and every letter we receive in any hearing. And remember, our jurisdiction is that of the Wetlands Protection Act and the Wetlands Bylaw, not zoning, building, or health. All right, first up, Thomas and Elizabeth Sheehy, the Quinella Group, LLC, 22 Millfield Street, Woods Hole, Mass, for permission to install a dock in Eel Pond. Ms. Bergeron.
yes, I am attempting to promote Matt Costa up as a panelist. Brian, if you're to be a part of this hearing too, can you raise your hand?
And for the record,
Thank you.
the quorum is all of us present tonight, as this has not been previously opened.
Good evening.
Hi, Matt.
All right. Mr. Costa, you're up, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I have a rather large monitor. Sometimes I get complaints about the size. So please speak up if things look too small. I'll do my best to zoom in on them. All right, so I'm Matt Costa, Cape and Islands Engineering. I'm here tonight with Attorney Brian Wall. Together, we're representing the applicants, Mr. and Mrs. Sheehy, who have presented a notice of intent application to the commission for the installation of a new single-family dock. in the waters of Eel Pond. Mr. and Mrs. Sheehy may also be in the audience as well. Pardon me, watching. Pam, Alyssa, do you happen to see any email or person in waiting that's Pam Newbard or Megalodon or anything like that? She
I
was
do
gonna
not.
attempt to show up, so she might not.
I'll keep an
Um,
eye out. I don't see her yet.
Okay, great. So we're here tonight under this notice of intent for this new dog. We're over on Eel Pond in Woods Hole. We take a look at Google Earth. Pardon me, we zoom in. Here's the locus of the property right here. It's this particular house. If we zoom out a little bit, we see where we are in Woods Hole, right on Eel Pond. We have single-family homes surrounding us with the exception of our direct abutter. This is actually a boathouse. It is not a dwelling. Eel Pond is used primarily for access to the water. It has been used that way for many years. We took a look at the history. One of the things that we noticed is the consistency in the use. And the reason I'm bringing this up now is because we think that this particular site, this particular proposal is unique to what you see traditionally with docks. Where we are here is an area that is been used and heavily used. And I'm going to pull up a photo from 1969. No particular significance with the date. I wanted to demonstrate the time period and the consistency of use over time. As you see in 69, which is well over 50 years ago, it is heavily used for boating activity. Full mooring fields, docks throughout the pond, fully developed. The water quality has been such that this has never been used for shellfish. It's not mapped as shellfish area. We've tried to look back through the history and talk to folks, and we couldn't find anybody that could ever remember this being used for shellfishing or open for shellfishing. And that's a significant point that I want you to remember as we go forward to talk about this proposal. So the particular dock being proposed here is your standard timber structure. If you look up into the profile, I'll try to zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. We're coming off the property where there's a seawall. We've elevated the dock to account for shoreline access. And then based on some feedback from the community, we submitted a revised plan last week where we made some adjustments to the dock from the original filing. And what we did there is we lowered the deck, the timber deck elevation. There were some complaints about the height of the dock and the look of the dock. And if you do look at your surrounding docks in those areas, they are low profile, many with just ramps off the wall out to a float, such as the two on either side of us, and very similar throughout. There are some elevated walkways over in the corners over here, which is similar to what we're proposing. So one of the things we also made a change on was the number of piles that are being proposed for this project. And we reduced the number of piles by shortening the dock, the timber walkway length, extending out a ramp, and then using 2 piles out onto the float. This is an area that's fairly protected, and the 2 piles to hold the float should be more than adequate. The float in this particular location has 3 feet of depth below it. It would not require any float stops. The decking itself is not traversing over any salt marsh So there's no concern with the height of the decking. We think that this design where we dropped it down slightly would be more in keeping with the neighborhood. Other than that, it's a pretty straightforward dock design. To give you some better context on what's happening and what it looks like, here is an aerial that might be a little hard to follow, but the dock is superimposed, the aerial's underlaid on the plan really, and it shows you where we are. And give me a minute to get that zoomed in and centered. Shows you where we are in relation to the neighboring docks. There is adequate space for navigation. We did submit the plan to the harbor master for review, and he did give a favorable review. We did have a shellfish survey done by Pam Newbart with Megalodon, and that has been included in the notice of intent application. You will notice that the results of that survey were interesting, and that it was not its typical substrate. It wasn't something that was really suitable for shellfish habitat, but there were high densities, or there were densities of shellfish found that exceed those thresholds that are outlined in the FWR regulations. We believe that those FWR regulations actually, in this particular very unique case here, don't apply. And Brian Wall, who is, as I stated, was joining me tonight to represent the applicants, is gonna explain that in more detail for you in just a minute. Now, why we want to really drive the point home that this is a unique circumstances, I want to alleviate any concerns about if this dock was to gain approval, that you would be creating some sort of precedent, or you would be deviating from your the typical way you review projects and your consistency with making those determinations. There are no other water bodies like this in town, with the exception of maybe Falmouth Harbor. Now, if we were in Green Pond, Great Pond, or just about anywhere else, we wouldn't be here tonight. But we are here because we think this is a very unique body of water for the purpose of accessing water, boating. What's primarily used for the purpose of accessing water and boating, and has been used that way for literally 100 years. Our particular property dates has a license, a Chapter 91 license dating back to 1914, where they filled some areas. The neighbor, north is straight up on this. The neighbor to the west here, the boathouse, actually had a marine railway Chapter 91 license for accessing the water. And the drainage system, the drainage for the area, together with the water quality, is such that this is never going to be open for shell fishing. Additionally, new regulations, and Brian can speak to this, will make sure of that, because they just blanketly do not allow shell fishing in mooring field areas. So given the fact that this has never been open for shell fishing, not historically used for shell fishing, and has no future ability to be used for shell fishing, we think that those are very unique facts in this case. And that is one of the reasons where you could comfortably approve this without deviating from your consistency over the years and holding that standard for the shellfish thresholds, and not create a precedent to be concerned with. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Attorney Brian Wall, who will explain the rationale behind that in a little bit more detail. Brian? I don't see him on the list, actually.
Yeah, I'm here, Matt. Good evening, everyone. Through the chair, for the record, Brian Wall representing the applicants together with Matt Costa. Just before I dive into my part about the shellfish, one thing I think the clients would want us to say regarding the uniqueness is that they think they're the only residential property on the pond without a dock, and they would like to have one, obviously. I'm here tonight to address your shellfish regulations in 1016-1H. I'm sure the commission is very familiar. There are two parts that I want to focus on, subpart 2 and subpart 3. And what your regulations provide is that in instances of significant shellfish, which we have here, significant densities of shellfish, you have a requirement in what's called your area B, which is the area of the walkway as it extends out towards the mooring area, that if there is significant quantities of shellfish, the applicant must propose a shellfish mitigation plan. And we did do that through Pam Newbert. We have it in writing. Matt can explain the details for that to you. Secondly, subpart 2 deals with what's called the mooring area or area A, and that is a prohibition on new docks if certain circumstances are met. So we obviously concede that there's significant shellfish habitat, but we contend that subpart 2 does not apply. And I'm sure you read my letter, but I'm just going to highlight what my contention is. The language of this particular subpart says that 1, the mooring field area contains significant quantities of shellfish, which we have, and the area has been historically used for shellfishing or has potential for shellfishing, which we do not think exists, and the sediment provides a viable shellfish habitat. So whenever courts or lawyers read statutes or regulations, you look at the language very carefully. And when the word "and" is used, it creates what's called a conjunctive test, which means that all of the parts of the regulation have to be met for it to be triggered. And again, in this particular instance, it says 1, significant quantities of shellfish and historical use, and sediment provides habitat. We believe that because of this particular area, there is not historic shellfish use and there's no potential. And the evidence that we have for that is Matt talked to the shellfish constable, and as he said in his presentation, the shellfish constable had no recollection of there ever being any shellfishing, I should say, in this particular area. And we refer to the DMF's site, and the website for DMF lists Eel Pond as an area closed to shellfishing. And so the simple point is, without historical use and with no potential for shellfishing, the middle prong of this test does not apply, and therefore the prohibition does not apply. And so we think that we have a project here that meets your regulations regarding docks. And I'm available for any questions. And Matt, if you want to give the details about the mitigation plan that Pam came up with.
So just to follow up on that, we are in fact proposing shellfish mitigation for this by way of both relocating any shellfish in the area of the piles before installation and through a shellfish seed donation of $5,000, which effectively means that there would be a net environmental benefit from this project moving forward through that shellfish mitigation. We have also, the applicants have had a shellfish expert other than Pam, I believe, submit a letter to you. He studies, he's studying at MIT, and he is an expert in this area. And, you know, they help you understand that this, both him and Pam, that both the area is historically used for boating and is not has not been used for shellfishing, but more importantly, that if the dock moved forward, that there would be no negative impacts, no measurable negative impacts from it to the shellfish in this area. So both with the minimizing of the impacts, with the mitigation that's proposed to result in the net environmental benefit, and the fact that this technically does not meet that full criteria, as Brian stated, we are respectfully requesting you issue an order of conditions. With that, we'll conclude our presentation and be happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Matt. Ms. Bergeron.
Thank you. So just a couple of comments to go through. As it's been stated in the staff report, the staff's position hasn't changed since the start of this project. We do not interpret that regulation the same way that Attorney Wall does, and I'm not aware of a situation in the past in which it has been interpreted that way. So I'll leave that open to the commission to discuss. Question for Matt. Did you happen to send the Shellfish Constable the revised survey and request a revised report or memo from him?
We have not. It wasn't a revised survey. She just added the mitigation to the report. But
Okay.
I have not submitted that to Chuck for comment.
Okay, because in his initial report, I mean, nowhere does it say that the area will never be used for shell fishing. I don't know the criteria to actually rule that out definitively. I'm not sure we can do that in this hearing tonight to say that it has no potential and it could never be used. I mean, he speaks about the area as a potential nursery for young cohogs or even a broodstock resource. There are many cohogs there. In the shellfish report, I believe it says the threshold is exceeded if there are greater than one cohog per 1 meter squared in that area A and area B. And the report calls for 14.5 cohogs per meter squared in area A and 27 in area B. I mean, that's a lot. It's not just there's a handful. There are many out there that were discovered. You know, they are living there. I don't know what qualifies them as being harvestable and open for shell fishing, but they're there, they exist. And just going by the regulations for us, we cannot interpret the regulation in that way. So for us, it simply, unfortunately, does not meet that regulation in order to recommend approval of this new dock. Thank you for explaining what the aerial means. That makes a little more sense now. Certainly a very busy area. If the project does get approved, the staff does recommend, as we do with new docks, that only one boat should be moored on the dock going forward. I did add DMF's comments, which I think were based on the original proposal, right, Matt? You didn't get any revised comments?
Correct. Right.
Okay. So, you know, they do list that installing a dock where there are shellfish, you know, there can be indirect impacts that negatively impact them. Matt, with the revised dock cross section you provided where part of it was lowered, can you confirm you're still meeting the 1.5 to 1 requirement that the state will look for?
It's not a requirement, it's a recommendation. It's for
Okay.
areas where you're over salt marsh. It doesn't
Okay.
apply in an open water situation like this. And that would be
Gotcha.
something that Brendan at DEP would make the final determination on. And we're okay in this situation.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I didn't realize it was only for salt marshes. And just to reiterate what the chairman has says, we did receive a lot of abutter correspondence on this. It has all been added to the record, read by the staff, and submitted to the commission. I do know that we'll probably have a few comments later on, but I'm all set for now. Thank you.
If, Mr. Chairman, if I may, I just want to clarify one thing. Is that when we say that there's no future of this being open for shell fishing, there is regulation in place. I believe, Ryan, you just dealt with this recently that you could speak to, but water quality is what's going to drive this. Water quality hasn't been suitable for the last 50 years and there's no improvements around here. So it's not going to be suitable going forward, but Brian's going to mention a regulation that's actually going to help clarify that.
Yeah, thank you, Matt, and at the pleasure of the chair. I just want to focus in on the language of your regulation. It says the area has been historically used for shell fishing or has potential for shellfishing. I don't think we have to establish that it will never, ever be. But to Matt's point, what we found out by looking at the DMF's website, they have recently changed their regulations, and they now call areas that are used for mooring fields for boats as conditionally closed to shellfishing. I'm not exactly sure the science behind that. I think that because of the pollutants possible from boats, or maybe people emptying the head when they're not supposed to. So the point here is, if you look at your reg, it says the area has been historically used for shellfishing. The evidence from the constable says that it hasn't. And I think he said he couldn't remember for the last 40 years it ever being fished. And then as far as the potential for shellfishing, I think that DMF change in regulation takes care of that, because this is a mooring field. And so therefore under DMF, they're never going to open it up to shellfishing because of the mooring field. And that's the photos that Matt showed you. I'm sure you're all familiar with the pond. It's full of moored boats, obviously in the summer. So that's why we think that this prong is not met. And as a result, the prohibition does not apply.
All right. Alyssa, you good?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you, Attorney Well, for sharing that.
Thank you.
I can't really speak on that. I think that's more of the MES department's territory. But thank you for adding that to the record.
Sure.
All right. Commissioner comments. Betsy.
Thanks, Jamie. I don't have any questions. I do have some comments. I also am experienced with this and have even a more of a historical recollection perspective than Chuck does, where it's really great because Chuck does have a great memory, but 40 years isn't that far back. And so I don't think you could say it hasn't been 40 years. It's never been. There was a time where Eel Pond, there was marshes to either side. They were filled in, like where NBL is. That's why Chapter 91 applies all the way around that. So all that area is built on fill. And I'm sure there was a time, at some time in historical times, if we say historical times start when the Europeans were here, that it was used for shellfish. But what I really want to emphasize is, and Alyssa put it the best way, you can't say that it isn't good habitat because we haven't defined it as good habitat. If there are a lot of shellfish in an area, it's good habitat for those shellfish. And unfortunately, we're very anthropocentric in our views of things. And we say, well, if you can't harvest these shellfish, then they don't have an important function. Well, in fact, they do have an important function. They're obviously happily living there. They're happily filtering that water. And Matt's right. It does get somewhat polluted, although it doesn't have direct nitrogen input because there's sewers down there, but there's plenty of nitrogen coming from the rain and so forth. But every year they're producing larvae that are used as food for the filter feeders that are in there, and as well being swept out as the tide goes in and out to perhaps settling somewhere else. And they're also part of the food chain. I mean, there are things that, so they take plankton that they're filtering, they grow their own bodies, and then fish or birds or other animals eat those shellfish. So, so I guess the bottom point is it doesn't meet the regulations. Thanks, Jamie.
All right. Kevin.
No comments. It just really kind of thinking this over. Thank you.
All right. Maury.
Well, ditto for what Betsy said, but also when to Brian, when you said no shellfishing is allowed in mooring fields, historically, knowing and being a commercial shellfisherman years ago, when all the boats were off of docks or the seasonal floats were taken out, that was when we would go and, of course, they didn't close shellfish beds like they do now. But even when they, like West Falmouth, for instance, they close in the summer, but once fall comes, scallop season and whatever, they open them back up. And because all the seasonal docks are gone, everybody fishes those areas. So I don't know where this new thing that you can't fish a mooring field, maybe during the boating season, but off season, I mean, the shellfishermen are out there 12 months out of the year shellfishing. So I have not seen that regulation. I would like to see it in writing that the DMF says that, but it's just something that I'm not aware of. But other than that, we're not the only things that eat shellfish. And just because those shellfish don't live in a palace, maybe not the perfect, substrate that a lot of other shellfish do, they're very happy in their mediocre, muddy place. And they're supplying seed, they're supplying food. And it's not just all about us. It's also about who else they supply food and resources to, and especially the seed that they're going to produce that will drift and seed other areas. And to say never, I don't think is a very good way to look at that. We'll never shellfish there. There are a lot of places that we thought would never be opened again, and they are. And it's something that could change, and we hope in a good way. And that's all. Thank you.
Steve. You're on mute. Steve.
I'm
Steve.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
You got it now?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, I was sneezing. I had to turn off my speaker.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm sure you would, but I'm quite a sneezer. Matt, I wanted to ask some questions about the dock and the proximity to other docks in the area. Could you bring the screen back up and zoom it so my old eyes can see?
Sure.
There we go. Come on. Oh,
Can you see that? Okay. Oh, wrong one. Can you see that? Okay.
yeah. Yeah, that's good. So I'm just trying to figure out the alignment into the pond of the farthest point of your dock compared to others. Is that straight line there?
Yeah. So here's ours in the brown, and here's the neighbors. So we're due to they have a shorter dock with a curved shoreline. So we're about the same as the folks to the east.
Is that what you're looking for, Steve?
There we go. Can I look to the west a little bit? Is there something even on your GIS?
To the west, yeah, the closest is this neighbor here, right here. This is us, our dock's right in this area.
And then
Here's-
after,
And here's the other neighbor.
okay,
There's
after the
nothing
boathouse, there's one. Okay. All right, thank you. I just wanted to look at it again, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any other questions. Thank you, Matt.
Welcome.
Mr.
Probably
Mr.
take that
Chairman,
down, Matt.
if the
Hold
commission.
on, hold on, Commissioner comments. So Matt, I'm always busting your chops about staking. I gotta tell you, this is one of the best staking jobs I've seen in a long time. I mean, fantastic. I saw the stakes in the water. I mean, this is going back to the original hearing, but the hearing date. So kudos for that.
Oh, thank you.
All right, Maury.
Today the stakes weren't there. There was only one really close up because I went back to just revisit. So yes, the first ones were great. Today's weren't so great. And then secondly, you said you're going to store the floats in the upland. Where are they going to be stored?
It would be off-site.
It says on site on your plan. I believe. But maybe I'm reading it wrong.
Well, it would either be in the backyard or be offsite. I think it would probably be offsite if they do take it out. A lot of people are leaving with the encapsulated plastics. A lot of them are leaving them in all year.
Okay. I was gonna say, because you don't have any room on that lot to store them on the lot, but you said you were, so.
Yeah, no, there may be like a wintertime picnic table or something. Just put 'em in the back, yeah.
Be creative, that's good. Thank you. That's all.
All right. Mr. Wall, you had something to add?
Yes, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to discuss the comments that Betsy made and Maury made. I think they're excellent comments about what the shellfish can do for the area. I don't disagree with that, and all of you know I'm not a scientist. But I'd like to focus in on the language of the regulation at issue. Again, there are 3 prongs, and the language that's used is very specific. The first one says the mooring field contains significant quantities of shellfish. We agree with that, that exists. The third one talks about, and the sediment provides a viable shellfish habitat. So we agree that there's a habitat there because the shellfish are there. The language of the second prong specifically uses the word shell fishing. It doesn't say shellfish. So all those good qualities that were cited aren't what the regulation is actually trying to protect. It very specifically says used for shell fishing. And I think it's not disputed that it's not. Also, I think the words that we're using, we have to be careful with it about, we're not saying it was never ever used and it never ever will be. What the regulation says is has been historically used. And I get Betsy's point, but historically is not defined in the regulations. So I think we have to look at it, what did it reasonably mean? And I would suggest the word has been historically used is that there's some record of it being shellfished. And in this particular instance, going back 40 plus years, there's not. And also, again, focusing very precisely on the language at issue here, it doesn't say never ever will be. It says, or has potential for shellfishing. And what we're suggesting is that because of the way that eel pond is used, and because of that DMF regulation or policy that I referred to, it doesn't have potential because it's a closed area from DMF. And that's why we think that the second prong is not met, despite all those good things that I think the shellfish there are doing. And then lastly, I'm going to tread over my area of discipline, but the regulation, I'm sorry, the dock meets all of your design criteria as far as height above the water, et cetera. And so I think that if we meet all those criteria, there's a presumption that we're not having an adverse effect because you allow docks with 3 feet of depth at the end. So I think that those shellfish that are there are protected by the design. So again, we think this meets your regulations.
Yeah, and just to add to that, if I can't recall exactly what I said, but I wasn't implying that it had never, ever been. I mean, there was a point in time, obviously there were shellfish here, there weren't people here. But if we go back at least the 50-something years to 69, we see it's evident of the intensity of use. In that, as far as anyone can remember, not just Chuck, but Jeff Johnson reached out to a longtime contact at DMF who would work there, and since retired, they can't remember any time where this was shellfish. So we're in the 50-year realm. Now, usually the past is not a great indicator of the future, but in a water quality situation, things typically don't get better. And here, with all the boating activity, it is highly unlikely. There's no guarantees in life and nothing is 100% assured, but the probability of this being open is extremely close to zero, statistically speaking. So that's the point where we're getting across. We're not speaking and never will and never has. It's more in line with the context of the regulation and the probability being close to zero that this is ever going to be open. And additionally, with all this boating activity here, this dock is not going to change the shellfish in this pond. I mean, this is the only property that doesn't have a dock here. And adding the 4 or 6 piles that we have, it is not going to be the straw that breaks any camel's back here. The shellfish will exist. and continue to exist and continue to form, to provide the function that they provide. So that's our rationale. Thank you.
All right. Melissa, do you see anything in the public chat function, please?
If I may, could I make one other comment before
Oh,
we go
I'm
to
sorry.
public chat? No, no worries. Just to follow back on Attorney Wall's comments, I appreciate you bringing up this DMF new ruling, I think it was. And I see that you're using it as part of your argument here, and it's difficult when the staff and the commission were not provided with that, if that's part of your basis for trying to, pursue this application here. We have not been aware of it. We had no time to review it. I do not have any updated comments from the harbor master or the shellfish constable that can elaborate on it and teach us about it. So it's difficult to have it used as part of the argument now when we have no knowledge about it and haven't had time to research it. And the reason I brought up the notion about how this had no potential for shellfishing is because that's what was stated as part of the argument here. I wrote down a quote, will not be used for shellfishing, has no potential for shellfishing, and I'm not sure if we're the qualified personnel to make that determination. That's all.
All right. Maury.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Alyssa just answered it. It was with a policy for the mooring field. Thank you.
all right.
We do have a hand raised.
Okay.
Let me see. Mr. Morris, I'm going to promote you to a panelist. You'll see a box appear on your screen. Just click the button. There you go. If you can turn on your video and audio when you're ready.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, and see you.
Okay. A couple of points, and you folks are dealing in your area of expertise, and I don't have that expertise, but I understand English language, and this is being applied for under a single family home, single family dock, where in fact this is a 6-unit apartment building that's operating in a residential zone under a special permit from the town. And the property was recently bought by the Quinella Group, and their corporate charter says that they are in the business of purchasing, selling, and renting out commercial and residential property. Now, I'm afraid if the town sees fit to issue this permit for this dock, that if a marina comes along, you can't stop it. You've already issued a commercial entity a dock permit, and I think you're opening yourselves up to quite a bit. We're concerned about setbacks. Could I ask you to, my son Ben is on this call also. Could you unmute him so that he could share a couple of pictures with you?
Okay, is he sharing them on your behalf?
Yes.
Okay, let me try to promote him to a panelist as well. Here he comes. Oh, Ben, if you can unmute and turn on your video. Should be in, oh, there we go.
What do you have for us, sir?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of difficulty getting this in a size that is going to be useful or really viewable. I'm happy to share this, but unfortunately it's just a thumbnail based off of the way that I have it on my machine here.
Let me go ahead and keep talking then, and you can work on that, Ben. But what I wanted to show you is, we are the abutter to the west. Our our building predates the apartment building. You can check Mass Historical on that if you care to. But when I say abut, we're literally, that building was built within 6 inches of our building. And that goes back to that building was built in 1916, the apartment building. Again, this is available from Mass Historical. So I don't know where the license that they say was issued in 1914. If you could show Ben the Sanford fire maps for back then, those are historical documents that are credible, and they do. There was nothing there but marsh in 1914 when our boathouse was there. So, but what we're concerned about is setbacks, and it would appear that the town uses 10-foot setbacks for this, as they would in a completely residential neighborhood. There, Ben just brought up the Sanford fire maps, shows Eel Pond, Millfield Street. Park Avenue is now Bell Tower Lane, and you can see that beside the boathouse, there's water, and where that line is for 410, that's where the Thompson property starts. So the apartment building was built on filled land, and I'd point out too that they've dumped rocks over the years in order to protect their seawall. And I think there's a basic tenet of the law that says you can't create your own injury and then ask for relief from it from a municipal entity. And I'd argue that that's what they're doing here. They've filled in the Eel Pond in front of their place, and now they have to go out 65 feet to get into 3.5 feet of water. People do this on beaches all the time. They don't want to lose their beach, so they put riprap in and put little jetties out. Anyway, I don't want to take too much of your time.
Thank you.
Chapter 91 of the state code says that it prohibits docks that interfere with access to adjoining areas. I would disagree with what they say, that this does not impede our approach to our dock. We can't approach our dock from the west because of rock piles there. And with the southwest wind in the summer, it's you really have to come in there with a little bit of power on. I have a 100-ton master's license and 100,000 miles of boating, but in the afternoon when it's blowing 25, having just 20 feet to leeward of you is not a very comfortable thing. So, and finally, point two is the dock now is going to be 3 feet above water level. And that that in itself says that there's going to be wave action under that 3-foot dock, and it's going to be trying to lift that dock out of the land. They're talking about 6 piles. I don't know if they've done any investigation as to the bottom, any coring or anything, but if they haven't, they're going to bring a big barge in and start searching for a good spot. And they're not going to do the shellfish any good. So thank you for your time. I appreciate your analysis of this, and thanks again.
Thank you, sir.
Mr.
Matt?
Chairman, for the record, this is a single family house. It's not an apartment building. They take on boarders, rent rooms as allowed under zoning, and that's not a conservation issue.
All right. Not in our purview. All right. Alyssa, is there anything else in the public chat function?
There is a public chat. There's one more person who would like to be promoted. Mr. Thompson, I'm going to promote you to a panelist.
You're still on the video.
I took myself off. desk and
Mi-
stuff.
Mr. Morris, we can still hear and see you, just so you know.
Sorry. Okay.
No worries.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir,
Yes,
you're
sir.
up.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and the panel for allowing me to speak. I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. I firstly want to say I'm next door at number 18 Millfield Street. I'm the abutter to the east, and I want to also highlight that I am in no way a NIMBY in terms of general objections to things being built, but this structure is completely out of keeping with all the other structures on the north side of Eel Pond. It seems to me there's many state guidelines, which I know are not the purview here, that this structure does not meet, but I think more relevant to this hearing and the town of Falmouth wetland regulations, I'd like to make three specific points. The first is on the general environment and environs, and I'm not talking about the negative impact on shellfish and quahogs and so forth, which you're all much more experts than I am. I'm very specifically talking about the environment, that this 65-foot pier and dock is completely out of keeping with all the small docks, the floats and ramps on the north shore of Eel Pond. It still has 6 very large fixed pilings. Its deck height after the reduction is still 2.5 and 4.5 feet above mean high water and low water respectively, and a rail height of 5.5 to 7.5 feet above those benchmarks. There is absolutely nothing comparable to it on the North Shore in the environs. The town of Falmouth wetland regulations say, and I'm quoting, depending on their height, length, compatibility with surrounding environs and overall visibility, docks can create an adverse impact on the aesthetics of the area. Well, this proposed design very clearly does that. My second point is that the pier and dock design is completely out of keeping with the stated use of the applicant. The usage was claimed to be, and I'm quoting here, to launch a kayak or small boat. Unlike any other float, pier or dock in the environment, it's designed with both the supply of water and power. The pilings, pier and floating dock design lends itself to the docking of large boats and potentially commercial operations. So I repeat, such a large dock with multiple boats berth is potentially at odds with the surrounding environment and the ecological environment. The last point I want to make is on recreation and navigation. Mr. Morris has already touched on navigation. He's much more learned than I am, so I won't want to repeat what he said about nautical matters. But this proposed dock extends 65 feet from the seawall, with one or more possibly large boats berthed at the dock and sitting on existing moorings. If you've got boats sitting on existing moorings, EPW 128 and EPW 177, which are both marked on the plans, a lateral eastward approach from the west is significantly impeded and potentially hazardous. This is all the more so given the proximity of the marked rock, so-called piano rock, and other rocks which are not marked on the applicant's plans. The Falmouth Code highlights that a proposal that affects navigation is likely to have a significant or cumulative negative impact on recreation. Even after the revisions, the handrail and balustrade structure at eye level of a boat operator or paddleboard operator obviously represents a navigational line of sight hazard, and to quote the town regulations, interferes with recreational boating activities. So in summary, I object to this proposal. It very substantially violates the amenity of my home, but that's another issue. More pertinently, for this hearing, it contravenes town regulations regarding the local environment, stated purpose, and the free and safe navigation and recreation of the others. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Alyssa, is there anything else in the chat function, please?
Nothing else.
Thank you. Maury?
I had one quick question about the rocks that they're saying they're going to relocate to drive the piles. Is there a methodology for doing that? And what is the disturbance going to be?
We don't need to relocate them. The piles are located at the, they're not located in them.
You, on your plan, Matt, it says, and it shows, it says dumped stone to be removed and reset to drive piles. It's on the plan, the updated plan, dated, revised. I hope it's the right one, 1/24/24.
Yeah,
So
that would
one
be,
close right by the seawall.
yeah, there's one pile there where potentially they would need to push over a stone or two, but we're not taking out any stones and putting any stones back or anything like that.
Well, when you say dump stones to be removed, it doesn't say you're just gonna bump it out of the way. I think if you're gonna put it on your plan, it should be clear. Because that
agree
to
with
me says you're gonna pull the rocks out, and we have shellfish there. So again, just concerned about the habitat that's gonna be disrupted.
I agree with you. That should be more, that
And
should
is
be
there gonna be
noted.
water and power?
I'm
Will there be
sorry.
water and power? That
Yes.
gentleman said it was water and power, but I did not see it on the plan.
There's, I believe there's notes on here. It's pretty typical that we always include water and power.
Yeah, but you don't show where you're gonna put it on the plan, where the water is gonna come from, and usually you show the electric line and the water line.
We don't,
Yeah,
we
you
can,
do.
if you want, we don't usually show the electric and water lines running to the dock. We just say that there's gonna be water and power.
Well, we usually do, because we don't know if it's seasonal, if it's a 4-foot dig, we don't know where, if it's gonna run through salt marsh, so, I mean, we do ask that, Matt, and it's not on the plan. Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments?
I'd
All
like to
right.
make a motion. May I make a motion?
I believe so.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to close the hearing and take it under advisement.
Carlo Hawk, second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to close the hearing. Any other comments or questions?
I had one question, Mr. Chairman, just before
Okay.
this closes too quickly. Is there any more information that you feel that you need? I heard Maury say that she wanted some revisions to the plan, and Alyssa asked for some information about the DMF.
I didn't ask for revisions.
Well, I thought you were talking about the stones and the power.
No, you said they're on the plan, I just asked if they were there.
Okay.
All right, anything else? All right, the motion and the second on the table is to close the hearing. We're voting to close the hearing. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Maury,
Carlo Hawk's aye.
Steve.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We have closed this hearing. Thank you, Mr. Costa. Thank you, Mr. Wall.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to
Good
the
night.
participants.
Have a nice evening.
Have a good
Night, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Before we move on, I just want to acknowledge the presence of our Board of Selectmen liaison, Robert Mascali. Thank you, Bob, for participating tonight. Next up, vote orders of condition. I'm sorry, I skipped a step. The next hearing had already been continued, so that's why I skipped it. That brings us to vote order of conditions. Pincinel Builders, 362 Ecopesket Road, East Falmouth, Mass.
All right, so I have the quorum as everybody for all three of these tonight. This project is the existing cabana on the property off Acapesket, right by the water. They will be reconstructing it, moving it slightly landward, decreasing the overall impervious surface. For what I have on my notes is we were looking for a revised plan to show replacement of the young oak that will be displaced during the construction. We would like to see the proposed electric and water lines. Any disturbance to the bank in which native shrub material is removed, we would like to see that restored and sort of the square footage that comes with it. I have a note that we did not want any draining into the pond, so to make that a condition, because right now there's a weird pipe coming out of it. We wanted to protect the mature oaks on site with construction fencing. I believe Mike Borselli said they're pitching the roof landward into a dry well, so I think that part is covered. Maury, I think this is a note from you. I wrote down a revetment condition. I think this has to do with the type of bank in the area.
Yeah, grandfathering, because both structures will be raised, so they're no longer existing structures from pre-84.
Got it.
There's no future hard armoring. I think that's in our regulation.
Okay.
And the other thing was jute mat plants on the east side, jute mat that hill, right?
Correct.
Because it'll be disturbed.
That's all I had. Any other notes that I missed?
All righty. What are you thinking?
How about a motion to approve an order of conditions as discussed?
And second,
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Any other questions or comments? All right, we're voting. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Maury,
Arlo Hawk's Eye.
Steve.
and I.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, 3 Tonsett Road Realty Trust, 3 Tonsett Road, Falmouth, Mass. Alyssa,
Thank you. So this project is for the septic upgrade from 2 cesspools to a Title V system under the driveway. The engineer last week was unfamiliar with the new Title V changes. He did look into it, and believe it or not, this area is just outside. So there's
thought it
no
was.
requirement. Yeah, it's just a couple.
I
actually
couldn't tell on the map, but I thought it
Yeah.
was just outside.
Yeah, so they would not have that requirement in the future to need to go to an IA system, so they're not going to propose one at this time. There was a couple things that the staff noticed that are being addressed in terms of existing violations on site. The mitigation will be beefed up to what it should be under the previous order of conditions. Additionally, we discovered that a piece of decking that was supposed to be removed to achieve that 200 square foot increase in the velocity zone was not done so, but is proposed to be taken care of. The other note staff had was that the shed on site was installed without a permit. It is a velocity zone, and we would recommend that it is removed. I'm not sure if you would like to condition that any of this work takes place prior to the septic upgrade or within a certain time frame. If so, I can note that.
well, the deck piece that was supposed to be removed, wasn't that supposed to be done before in conjunction with the new deck work?
Correct.
And the new deck work was completed, correct?
Yes, I believe this was around 2016.
But they neglected to remove the extra piece.
Yes,
So with that in mind,
that's
it
how it
should be,
appears.
yeah. So that should be a requirement before we sign off on the septic.
Okay.
I mean, we gave them a chance, right, Maury?
Yeah, but we don't sign off on the septic, do we? The Board of Health will sign off. We'll never see it again. So maybe we should say the deck has to be removed before the septic begins, and that way
Yeah.
it'll
Well,
happen.
Okay.
I think all the stuff that was supposed to have been done, like mitigation and the septic and the shed, they should all go before the septic work begins.
Pending weather conditions that might eliminate
The planting
you know,
issues,
exactly.
right,
So the 2 construction issues should be resolved.
right. And then planting should be in the spring. Or, well, it should be in the spring. I mean, if they choose not to build the septic until the next year, I mean, it's a 3-year permit, but yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you want to go with like a end of June deadline?
Yes.
Got it.
And are we requiring the removal of the shed?
Yes.
And that should be the same time frame, correct?
Yes. The two construction issues, the shed or deconstruction issues, the shed and the part of the porch that isn't supposed to be there.
Anything else?
I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed and noted by Alyssa.
And second,
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Anything else? All right, we're voting. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Maury,
Carlo Hawks eye.
Steve.
no.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. Next up, Eric Forsgard, 45 Owl's Nest Road, Falmouth, Mass. Alyssa.
Thank you. All right, so this is the house reconstruction down on Owl's Nest. Kind of that cool lot where it's got that bank going all the way around it. Let me see, that's really the main project is the home, redoing the walkways and the patio around it. Upgrading the septic. Staff did have a couple concerns on the project, which were remedied for the most part through their revised plan. They now have a mitigation requirement. However, that calculation was a little off, so we'll need a revised plan that shows the correct percentages. They had over 100% of mitigation. I think it was like 140 or 120 or something, so they just got to tweak their numbers. There was commentary about the quote-unquote homemade groin in the water, that collection of rocks. So we were going to have them
Leave the rocks. No,
leave the
just
rocks
leave the
alone.
rocks there. Leave the rocks alone.
Okay, leave them alone. And we also were hoping on that revised plan to have a notation or to either have a special condition to remove the unpermitted pier on the property. There was talk about how they would come back to us to permit something, but in the event that perhaps that doesn't happen, maybe it's a good idea to make sure this one is no longer in use, being unpermitted and unlicensed.
So if this was never permitted, so they can't come back and say, we had a dock, but you made us remove it, so we want to put a new one in. They would have to
not
start
found a
afresh.
record. Yeah, I
Okay.
did not find any records of it being permitted. If they can provide something from, I know you say 40
Whatever.
years isn't a long time, it is for me.
40 years was yesterday, believe me.
If they find something, we'll work from it, but I couldn't find any permits.
When was 40 years ago? 1983?
No,
Is that 40?
2003. That was 40 years ago.
No, that's what I said. 40 years ago was 1983.
20.
That's like yesterday.
Yeah. Sadly, I remember that.
Well, except for Alyssa. I think we all remember 40 years
That's what I
ago.
mean.
That's 10 years before me.
Yeah, not you. You're excused. So I'll make a motion to issue an order of conditions as discussed.
Carlo Hawks second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to issue an order of conditions. Anything else? All right, we're voting. Betsy,
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye. Kevin,
O'Brien, aye.
Maury,
Carlo Hawks eye.
Steve.
And I.
It is unanimous. We have issued an order of conditions. And one quick note, there's no meeting next week.
Oh,
Yeah,
Yeah, why couldn't you
Nope.
give us Valentine's Day off instead, Jamie?
because I mean,
Yeah, that's right. That's the right answer.
And our new agent started today. Her name is
Oh,
Fallon.
really?
Next time you stop by, come and meet her.
Well, I'll come in to see her tomorrow.
Perfect.
Excellent. That's good. You didn't scare her off today,
I tried my hardest.
huh? She'll come back as general out there. Hey, all right. One more motion. Who wants it?
I make a motion to adjourn Harlow Hawks.
And second.
Gladfelter, aye.
Matthews, aye.
O'Brien, aye.
Harlow Hawks, aye.
Patton, aye.
It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
See you in a
Wonderful.
couple
Good night,
weeks, everybody.
everyone.